This isn't a place we ever expected to really land for any length of time. I mean, initially it was just supposed to be a place to store artwork and have a weekend retreat. But once we were out here all the time, it's just so nice. I really felt like we wanted to be here full time. Oh God, painting is so beautiful. Painting is just really beautiful material stuff. And I think that it's necessary for me to challenge the beauty of those materials. And especially, beauty can be kind of bland, you know, beauty can be kind of blunt. So to interrupt that beauty is a way of, for me, of making the paintings more lifelike. Once you make a commitment to color and you go all in on that aspect of painting, you know, the one thing you can't take out of paint is the color. That's the element that I chose to focus on. And then once I committed, the more research I did, the more I realized that the thing that I had committed to was the thing that had the least power historically, that color is often viewed negatively because it's considered superficial or cosmetic or too seductive and therefore not honest, not true, or too sensual, therefore not intellectual. So for me, going all in on color was a way to try to rewrite that history. I think color is the most important aspect of a painting. I think it's the first thing you see, the first thing you respond to. So I really try to use color in a way that allows it to be the most powerful part of the painting. And there are lots of ways I've tried to do that over the years. The most effective thing, I think, is to get color to actually do something, to make the color interaction either color, one color next to the other, or color in response to the environment, but the color becomes the active component of the painting. And I think for me that's been the most effective way to make the color powerful and to make paintings that are distinctive. So it's really hard to get fluorescent pink oil paint. Well, any fluorescent color, it's not made in oil paint. And the reason that you want oil paint is because it's more flexible. Like acrylic paint dries to the touch immediately and it looks really flat and plastic. There are a lot of reasons why I don't prefer acrylic paint, but oil paint has an open drying time. Like it doesn't dry immediately, so you can move it around a lot more, so it's a lot more flexible as a paint. I work with repetitive patterns, and repetitive patterns suggest kind of regular predictability, and that would be very comforting in the world right now, which seems so unpredictable and so disruptive. But the thing that becomes important about patterns is whenever there's an interruption, whenever things aren't as expected or predictable, and that's more like life. And I think that's why in my paintings, I try to make them more animated, more lifelike by interrupting the predictable repetition of the pattern. When it comes to the quatrefoils, initially it was just a simple experiment in the studio. I was painting circles, and the circles were lined up in a row, like rows and rows. There's circles about the size of a grapefruit on the edge of a canvas. It was an orderly pattern that referenced the body and referenced the female body in particular because of the circles. And I realized that if I took those 4 circles, like if I made a box and put a circle in each one and rotated it so that there was a circle, and a circle, and a circle, so it makes like a diamond shape out of those circles, it was more dynamic. And it started to reference not just painting and architecture, but that position of the 4 starts to open up all these other references that made the shape bigger in terms of what it could possibly mean. So there's the reference to architecture, there's the reference to religious symbols like a lotus blossom or the 4 apostles. And then the flower shape. And what is the flower shape? Well, a flower is a reproductive shape, and it's a portal. For me, it became important to try to explore the power of those colors because they had no power initially. So try to find a way to make a painting that had some expressive power, some power to locate itself within the history of painting, but with a color palette that was pastel. And then the color became much more material, I think, at that point. And then this impasto really had to do with trying to have another rhythm to how the painting is experienced. So there's the rhythm of the shape, 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 and the diagonal grid. But I wanted to find some way of articulating the space in between these visual events. These impasto bits that sit right on the surface project into the space, so they animate the space in front of the surface of the painting. I could think about modernism, early modernism, all those Matisse and Picasso paintings with a kind of harlequin grid-like pattern in them. And I wonder if that is too specific, like they get stuck in that time. But I don't think that happens with these. Then this notion of the drips, which they provide a line that is a quality of line that I couldn't get if I painted it by hand. But they also interrupt this regular pattern, this like rhythm that I've established through the repetition of the shapes. And now suddenly there's this grace note or breath of air or pictorial kind of fringe-like thing happening. That line wants to move around a little bit. And as you look at it over time, your eye starts to fatigue a little bit and you'll start to see an edge that looks brighter orange next to the magenta than it does, say, in the middle of this orange shape. And the way that your eye responds to this color over time is part of what I think I'm trying to do to make paintings that people will want to look at over time, that they do something that you can only see if you've looked at them for long enough in the rods and cones of your eyes to adjust. Crayon foundation was a really important project for me because the space is so beautiful and the history is so significant. I chose a color palette that would be very optically active because I wanted to fill the space with color, although I didn't anticipate that it would be so filled with color. So I painted each wall a different highly saturated fluorescent color. And, well, not each wall, opposite walls. So opposite red fluorescent color, opposite pink fluorescent. And then the wall that connected the two rooms together was orange fluorescent. So there were these ground colors that were very, very saturated and really bright. And the moment that happened in the space, like the whole space kind of like lit up. There are a number of ways in which the paintings can try to control architectural space, and one of them is through the size of the painting, you know, the relationship between the artwork and the space that it's presented in. So I've made a lot of paintings over the years that are wall-sized paintings, so they become the wall. And I've also made paintings that are painted directly on the wall so that they become more completely environmental. So that all four walls, in fact, might envelop the viewer. And I think all of these things are physical aspects of the painting that position the painting in relationship to the architecture, but also in relationship to the viewer, so that the viewer is in a space that's animated by the painting. They're immersed in the painting. And I felt like the painting is in a relationship with architecture, where architecture is always going to be dominant. Like architecture, because its actual space always has more painting than or power than a painting, because paintings are illusionistic space. They're not real space. So a lot of what I try to do is make real space in paintings by making paintings that perform like architecture. So the shape of the painting hangs like it's hanging in space like a textile. And making an image that appears to hang means that the shape of the painting is on top of the architectural support, but it has its own shape. It's independent from or separate from the shape of the canvas support. And also, making something that looks like it hangs is pictorial. It looks like something that hangs, not like an abstract painting. And to position the paintings in between abstraction and representation creates a tension that I'm interested in exploring. I think that the space that hasn't been articulated enough in painting is the space right in between the surface of the painting and where the viewer is. And I try to make paintings that address that relationship with the viewer when the viewer's right in front, and when they're 8 feet back, and when they're across the room, so that at each point, or from every vector, that there's a relationship that unfolds between the artwork and the viewer. Often in my work, I feel like I've made the most progress as an artist when I've made the worst choices. And what I mean by that is by embracing the thing that you're not supposed to do, the thing that's supposed to be considered bad because it's too feminine or too vulgar or too big or too loud. For all the reasons you shouldn't do something, I've had the most success going right toward that thing.